The auto industry is crashing. The world's biggest automaker is on the brink of bankruptcy.
It appears Chrysler, the country's third largest automaker, will file for bankruptcy, becoming the first of the big three automakers to do so.
Trucks have long been symbols of strength, durability, and reliability. For many automakers, they weren't just vehicles. They were lifelines that kept factories running and balance sheets healthy. Yet, behind the gleaming chrome grilles and aggressive marketing campaigns, some trucks carried a darker legacy. Instead of becoming bestsellers, they turned into financial nightmares that dragged entire companies into bankruptcy or forced them into costly restructures. Whether due to poor design, bad timing, rising fuel costs, or simply being too ahead or behind of their era, these trucks became cautionary tales in the automotive industry. What makes these stories even more compelling is how these models often looked promising on paper, only to devastate their makers in practice. In this video, we'll count down 9 trucks that secretly bankrupted their companies, exploring how each one contributed to a collapse nobody saw coming. Number 9. The Studebaker Champ. In the late 1950s, Studebaker was a company fighting for survival. The once respected automaker had already been struggling with declining passenger car sales, outdated factories, and fierce competition from the Detroit Big Three. In a last-ditch attempt to modernize its truck line, Studebaker introduced the Champ pickup in 1960. On the surface, it seemed like a smart move. A stylish, light-duty truck designed to compete directly with Ford's F-Series, Chevrolet's C-Series, and Dodge's D-Series. Unfortunately, the Champ became more of a symbol of desperation than innovation. The Champ was essentially a Frankenstein creation. Studebaker, short on cash, cobbled together the truck using existing parts from its car lineup. The cab was lifted from the compact Lark sedan, which gave the truck a lower roofline but also a cramped interior compared to rivals. Buyers who wanted rugged practicality didn't see the Champ as tough enough, while those who wanted comfort found it lacking. To make matters worse, the truck's outdated frame and underpinnings were no match for the modern designs Ford and Chevy were rolling out. Studebaker attempted to market the Champ as a forward-thinking vehicle, offering options like sliding rear windows and factory air conditioning, rare for trucks at the time. However, these features couldn't disguise the fundamental weakness of the platform. Production quality was inconsistent, parts were shared across too many struggling product lines, and reliability became an issue. Dealership networks, already thin due to Studebaker's declining fortunes, had trouble convincing loyal customers to choose a Champ over tried-and-true competitors. Financially, the Champ was a disaster. Instead of revitalizing the company's fortunes, it accelerated the decline. Development costs drained already limited resources, while sales numbers never reached the volume necessary to cover expenses. Between 1960 and 1964, only around 20,000 Champs were built, a drop in the bucket compared to Ford and Chevrolet, who sold hundreds of thousands of trucks annually. The Champ's failure didn't just reflect poor design. It highlighted Studebaker's inability to compete in a rapidly modernizing market. The truck was meant to keep Studebaker alive in the light-duty segment, but it did the opposite. By 1963, the company had shut down its South Bend, Indiana factory, effectively ending truck production. A year later, Studebaker abandoned the truck business altogether. In hindsight, the Studebaker Champ is often remembered as a what-could-have-been vehicle, stylish in its own quirky way, but ultimately doomed by timing and lack of resources. Its introduction came at the worst possible moment, when fuel efficiency wasn't yet a selling point and customers prioritized durability over novelty. For Studebaker, the Champ was less of a champion and more of a costly gamble that failed to pay off. The financial toll was devastating. Already weakened, the company's losses from the Champ hastened its retreat from the auto industry. What was supposed to be a savior ended up becoming one of the nails in Studebaker's coffin. Number 8. The International Harvester Scout II pickup. By the early 1970s, International Harvester was at a crossroads. Best known for its tractors, heavy-duty trucks, and agricultural equipment, the company had long been trying to capture a piece of the booming light truck and SUV market. With Ford's Bronco and Chevrolet's Blazer pulling in strong sales, IH hoped to cash in with the Scout II pickup, essentially a modified version of its popular Scout SUV. But while the Scout SUV built a cult following, the pickup variant ended up being a financial misstep that compounded IH's broader troubles. The Scout II pickup, introduced in 1971, was built on the same platform as the Scout SUV, but stretched into a truck body. On paper, it was a good idea. Combine the rugged off-road capabilities of the Scout with the utility of a pickup bed. Unfortunately, execution proved to be its downfall. The truck was cramped, underpowered, and expensive to build. IH didn't have the same economies of scale as Ford or GM, meaning each Scout pickup cost more to produce than its competitors' trucks. Yet it had to be sold at similar prices just to stay competitive. The design itself had quirks. While off-road enthusiasts appreciated its durability, mainstream buyers found the truck uncomfortable, noisy, and limited in payload compared to full-size trucks. The styling was boxy and utilitarian at a time when Ford and Chevy were modernizing their looks. Worse, IH's dealer network was small, limiting access for customers outside of rural areas. Financially, the Scout pickup never came close to profitable sales volumes. Production hovered at just a few thousand units per year, a drop compared to Ford's F-Series, which sold in the hundreds of thousands. IH poured money into tooling, advertising, and production for the truck, only to watch it gather dust on showroom floors. Instead of boosting revenue, the Scout pickup drained resources from IH's core business of heavy equipment and agricultural machinery. Adding to the woes, the 1970s brought a tidal wave of challenges: rising labor costs, strikes that crippled production, and the fuel crisis of 1973. Suddenly, customers were looking for more fuel-efficient options, and IH's big, thirsty trucks and SUVs seemed outdated. The company was spread too thin, trying to compete in passenger vehicles while still managing its massive agricultural and heavy truck divisions. The Scout II pickup was one gamble too many. By 1980, International Harvester was collapsing under financial strain. The Scout II pickup was discontinued along with the SUV, and IH eventually spun off its agricultural business into Case IH, while its truck division became Navistar International. The once mighty industrial powerhouse had effectively been broken apart, and the failed Scout pickup was one of the contributing factors that pushed IH toward bankruptcy-level restructuring. Today, collectors see the Scout pickup as a rare oddity, a rugged but flawed attempt at blending off-road capability with utility. But for International Harvester, it was a money-losing venture that siphoned away precious capital at the worst possible time. Instead of carving out a niche, the Scout pickup became a costly reminder of how diversification can sink a company already on shaky ground. Number 7. The DeSoto Adventurer Pickup. Concept turned disaster. By the mid-1950s, Chrysler Corporation had already built Plymouth, Dodge, and Chrysler-branded trucks, but it also owned DeSoto, a mark struggling to define itself. Desperate to expand the brand's identity, Chrysler approved a bold experiment, the DeSoto Adventurer Pickup. Though never mass-produced in huge numbers, this ill-fated project became one of the many mistakes that helped doom the DeSoto brand altogether. Unlike Dodge, which had carved out a reputation in trucks, DeSoto was always more of a mid-tier passenger car brand. The idea of branching into pickups might have seemed innovative at the time. After all, trucks were growing more popular beyond farms and construction sites. However, Chrysler's decision to green-light the Adventurer pickup stretched the company too thin and exposed just how little market demand there really was for a DeSoto truck. The Adventurer pickup was built using a Frankenstein mix of Dodge truck components and DeSoto styling cues. Essentially, it was a rebadged Dodge with some flashy trim, and customers saw right through it. Unlike Ford's Ranchero or Chevy's El Camino, which blended car-like comfort with truck practicality, the DeSoto pickup didn't have a strong identity. It was neither stylish enough to attract suburban buyers nor rugged enough to win over traditional truck customers. Worse, Chrysler's internal competition cannibalized the project. Dodge dealers had no interest in selling a near-duplicate truck under a weaker brand name, and DeSoto's limited dealer network didn't have the reach to move trucks at scale. The result was predictably disastrous. Sales were microscopic, and production costs were never recovered. At a time when Ford and GM were investing heavily in innovative truck lines, Chrysler's scattershot approach spread resources thin across too many brands. The Adventurer pickup epitomized this mismanagement. It didn't sink Chrysler outright, but it accelerated DeSoto's decline, draining resources that could have gone into revitalizing the brand's passenger cars. By 1961, DeSoto was gone. Officially, Chrysler executives blamed declining sales across the lineup, but automotive historians often point to ill-fated side projects like the Adventurer pickup as signs of the brand's lack of focus. Instead of building on strengths, Chrysler wasted millions chasing niches that didn't exist. From a financial perspective, the Adventurer pickup was small-scale compared to the losses of Studebaker or International Harvester. But in terms of brand damage, it was catastrophic. DeSoto never recovered its identity after dabbling in trucks, and Chrysler executives quickly realized that keeping the marque alive was more costly than shutting it down. Today, the DeSoto Adventurer pickup is an automotive ghost. Only a handful of prototypes and dealer conversions are known to exist, making them rare collector's items. Yet they serve as reminders of a brand that tried to step into the truck wars and ended up destroying what little stability it had left. In hindsight, the Adventurer pickup is proof that timing, focus, and brand identity matter just as much as engineering. For Chrysler, it was a footnote in history, but for DeSoto, it was one of the final nails in the coffin. Number 6. The Kaiser Jeep Gladiator J Series. In the early 1960s, Kaiser Jeep believed it was on the cusp of something revolutionary. Jeep had built its reputation on the rugged military Willys and civilian CJ models. But the company wanted to expand into the highly competitive light truck market dominated by Ford, Chevrolet, and Dodge. Their answer was the Gladiator J-Series pickup, introduced in 1962. On the surface, it looked like a winner, tough, utilitarian, and true to Jeep's off-road roots. Unfortunately, the Gladiator would become a heavy financial burden that hastened Kaiser's exit from the automotive business. The Gladiator had plenty of innovative features for its time. It was offered in both rear-wheel drive and four-wheel drive versions, had independent front suspension options, and borrowed much of its styling from Jeep's Wagoneer SUV. This gave it a modern look compared to the boxy pickups of the era. However, these advancements came with a steep price tag. The Gladiator was significantly more expensive to build than competitors, and Kaiser Jeep simply didn't have the manufacturing scale of Detroit's Big Three to bring costs down. Sales numbers reflected the problem. While Ford and Chevrolet moved hundreds of thousands of trucks annually, Jeep's Gladiator barely broke into five-figure production totals. Its niche appeal as a rugged off-road pickup attracted some loyal buyers, particularly in rural areas and among government fleets, but not nearly enough to cover development and production costs. Worse, the truck quickly developed a reputation for being underpowered. Early Gladiators relied on outdated engines that lagged behind the smooth, more powerful V8s offered by rivals. Compounding the issue was Kaiser Jeep's weak dealer network. Unlike Ford or GM, which had sprawling nationwide dealerships, Jeep's outlets were fewer and often concentrated in smaller towns. This severely limited exposure and sales potential. Add in rising maintenance costs and quality control issues, and the Gladiator quickly became more of a financial liability than an asset. The 1970s fuel crisis hit Jeep even harder. The Gladiator, never known for fuel efficiency, suddenly became unattractive to cost-conscious buyers. At the same time, the truck wars escalated, with Detroit automakers introducing more refined, powerful, and comfortable models. Kaiser Jeep simply couldn't keep up. By 1970, the financial bleeding was so severe that Kaiser sold Jeep to American Motors Corporation, AMC. While AMC kept the Gladiator alive for a while, it was already too late to reverse its reputation as a slow-selling truck that couldn't compete with industry leaders. The Gladiator's failure didn't just affect Kaiser Jeep's finances. It ended their role as an independent automaker. Kaiser, once ambitious enough to challenge Detroit, retreated entirely from cars and trucks after offloading Jeep. Though AMC tried to salvage the Gladiator's legacy, the damage had been done. Today, the Gladiator J-Series is a cult classic among Jeep enthusiasts, valued for its rugged charm and rarity. Ironically, Jeep revived the Gladiator name in 2019, finally achieving the success Kaiser dreamed of decades earlier. But in its original form, the Gladiator was more of a financial anchor than a lifeline, quietly pushing its parent company out of the automotive industry. Number 5. The Dodge Ram Charger pickup. In the late 1970s, Chrysler Corporation was already teetering on the edge of financial ruin. Gas prices had soared during the oil crises, consumer confidence in American cars was plummeting, and Chrysler was hemorrhaging money trying to keep up with GM and Ford. Into this storm, Dodge launched the Ram Charger pickup, essentially a spin-off of its SUV line, meant to capture a slice of the growing lifestyle truck market. Instead of saving the company, it became another costly misstep that contributed to Chrysler's brush with bankruptcy. The idea seemed logical at first: The Ramcharger SUV, based on Dodge's D-Series trucks, had been moderately successful with off-road enthusiasts and families who wanted something more rugged than a station wagon. Dodge executives thought, why not turn that platform into a pickup version to broaden appeal? The problem was that the market was already saturated with established full-size pickups. The Ford F-150, Chevy CK Series, and even Dodge's own existing truck line. The Ramcharger pickup had no clear niche, no distinct advantage, and no real reason to exist. Design issues made things worse. The truck was heavy, underpowered, and thirsty for fuel at precisely the moment when Americans were abandoning gas guzzlers. Customers looking for fuel-efficient alternatives during the late 70s energy crisis had no interest in a bulky Dodge that delivered single-digit miles per gallon. Those who wanted a workhorse truck didn't see it as more capable than the regular Dodge pickups, while lifestyle buyers gravitated to more stylish or practical options like the Ford Bronco or Chevy Blazer. Financially, the project was a disaster. Tooling costs were high, sales were dismal, and Dodge dealerships struggled to move inventory. Instead of drawing in new customers, the Ramcharger pickup mostly cannibalized sales from Dodge's own lineup. Chrysler, already cash-strapped, had sunk money into developing and marketing a truck that added little value. Meanwhile, the broader company was unraveling. Poor management decisions, outdated designs, and an over-reliance on inefficient V8 engines left Chrysler on the verge of collapse. In 1979, the company had to be bailed out by the U.S. government in one of the most dramatic rescues in automotive history. While the Ramcharger pickup wasn't solely responsible, it was symptomatic of Chrysler's scattershot strategy, chasing every possible niche without considering whether the market actually wanted the product. The truck was quietly discontinued after just a few years, and today it's largely forgotten outside of dedicated Dodge enthusiasts. Unlike its SUV namesake, which has gained a small cult following, the Ramcharger pickup is remembered as a financial misstep that came at exactly the wrong time. In hindsight, the Ramcharger pickup was less a bold innovation and more a sign of Chrysler's desperation. Instead of investing in fuel-efficient cars or refining its core truck line, the company poured money into a product that nobody really needed. For Chrysler, already drowning in debt, the Ramcharger pickup was another weight pulling it under. One of many small but costly mistakes that nearly bankrupted the automaker. Number 4. The Hudson Big Boy Pickup. By the late 1940s, Hudson Motor Car Company was a respected mid-tier automaker, best known for its sleek sedans and innovations like the step-down design. Flush with wartime profits and eager to expand, Hudson decided to enter the pickup truck market. The result was the Hudson Big Boy Pickup, introduced just as America's love affair with light trucks was beginning to take shape. On paper, it seemed like a strong move. In reality, it drained the company's resources and played a quiet but pivotal role in Hudson's eventual decline. The Big Boy was essentially a Hudson sedan grafted onto a truck frame. It featured the same passenger car styling cues, a comfortable interior, and Hudson's trademark straight-six engine. While this made the truck appealing to buyers who wanted a more civilized work vehicle, it came at a cost. The Big Boy wasn't nearly as rugged or versatile as Ford's F-Series or Chevrolet's advanced design trucks. Farmers and contractors, who represented the bulk of the pickup market at the time, found the Big Boy lacking in durability and payload capacity. Hudson poured money into marketing the big boy as a dual-purpose vehicle, something you could drive to church on Sunday and to the job site on Monday. Unfortunately, this straddling-the-line approach meant it didn't fully satisfy either audience. It was too fancy for blue-collar buyers and not stylish or efficient enough to win over suburban families. Worse, Hudson didn't have the manufacturing scale to compete with Ford and Chevrolet. Both companies were selling pickups by the hundreds of thousands, while Hudson struggled to move a few thousand big boys annually. Development costs remained high, especially since Hudson was a relatively small player in the industry. Every dollar spent on the truck was a dollar not invested in improving Hudson's bread-and-butter sedans, which were already facing stiff competition. By the early 1950s, the big boy's shortcomings were obvious. It was discontinued, but the financial damage lingered. Hudson had wasted precious resources on a truck that never came close to profitability. Meanwhile, the company's sedan lineup began to look dated, and sales dropped. By 1954, Hudson was forced into a merger with Nash Motors, forming American Motors Corporation, AMC. Though AMC carried on, the Hudson name was phased out just a few years later. The big boy pickup didn't single-handedly kill Hudson, but it siphoned resources at a critical time. Instead of focusing on its successful innovations, like the aerodynamic Hornet that dominated NASCAR, Hudson diverted attention to a truck project it could never hope to compete with against Detroit's giants. Today, surviving big boys are rare collector's items, admired for their quirky blend of car-like comfort and truck styling. But their legacy is bittersweet. They represent a time when Hudson tried to play in the big leagues and lost, spending heavily on a product that never found its audience. For Hudson, the big boy wasn't just a truck. It was a costly distraction that helped push the company toward the brink, proving once again how a single miscalculated product can tip a vulnerable automaker into financial freefall. Number 3. The Packard Clipper Pickup. By the mid-1950s, Packard Motor Car Company was in deep trouble. Once a symbol of American luxury and engineering excellence, Packard had fallen on hard times after World War II. Cadillac had overtaken it as the premier luxury brand, and Packard's shrinking dealer network and declining prestige made it increasingly irrelevant. In desperation, executives pursued oddball experiments to broaden their lineup. One of the strangest was the Packard Clipper Pickup, a half-hearted attempt to enter the light truck market, and one that drained money Packard couldn't afford to lose. The Clipper Pickup was essentially a Packard Clipper sedan converted into a utility vehicle with a small truck bed grafted onto the rear. Packard hoped it would appeal to businessmen or affluent suburbanites who wanted something classier than a Ford or Chevy pickup. But the execution left much to be desired. The truck was heavy, impractical, and expensive compared to mainstream pickups. Buyers who needed a true workhorse laughed it off as too delicate, while luxury buyers found it awkward and beneath Packard's status. Production was limited, with most units being dealer conversions or low-volume factory builds. But even in small numbers, the project was costly. Engineering resources were siphoned away from developing competitive sedans, the very cars that Packard desperately needed to revive its brand image. Worse, the Clipper pickup exposed just how out of touch Packard had become. Instead of focusing on core strengths, elegant luxury cars, the company chased a niche market that barely existed. Meanwhile, financial pressures were mounting. The company had merged with Studebaker in 1954, a deal that was supposed to create economies of scale, but instead saddled Packard with even more debt. The Clipper pickup, with its tiny sales and high development costs, became one more drag on already overburdened finances. By the late 1950s, Packard was in freefall. Factories were closing, dealers were abandoning the brand, and customers no longer saw Packard as a serious player in the luxury segment. The Clipper pickup vanished quickly, but the money wasted on it contributed to the company's inability to modernize its main product line. Without strong sedans to compete with Cadillac, Lincoln, and Chrysler, Packard had no chance. By 1958, the once proud automaker was gone. Looking back, the Clipper pickup is often cited as one of the strangest luxury trucks ever conceived. It tried to blend prestige with utility, but ended up pleasing no one. Collectors today view the few surviving examples as oddities, worth more for their rarity than their quality. For Packard, however, the Clipper pickup was more than an oddball experiment. It symbolized the company's mismanagement and desperation. Instead of focusing on revitalizing its brand identity, Packard wasted money on a truck nobody wanted. It was a classic case of a company chasing trends without understanding the market and paying the ultimate price. In the end, the Clipper pickup didn't just fail, it underscored Packard's slow march toward extinction. What could have been a quirky side project became another nail in the coffin of an American icon. Number 2. The Bricklin pickup prototype, SV1-based disaster. In the 1970s, automotive entrepreneur Malcolm Bricklin was chasing big dreams. After importing Subaru to North America and dabbling with various ventures, he launched the Bricklin SV1, a futuristic safety sports car with gull-wing doors. While the SV1 itself became a financial catastrophe, Bricklin also toyed with the idea of a pickup truck variant. Though only a handful of prototypes were ever built, the money sunk into the project accelerated the collapse of the Bricklin company and helped drag it into bankruptcy. The concept was bizarre but ambitious. Take the fiberglass-bodied SV1 sports car and graft a pickup bed onto the rear. The idea was to market it as a sporty, fuel-conscious alternative to traditional pickups during the energy crisis. But just like the SV1, the execution was deeply flawed. The pickup was underpowered, weighed far too much thanks to its heavy safety features, and carried an astronomical price tag compared to mainstream trucks from Ford and Chevy. Production was plagued by the same issues that crippled the SV1: poor build quality, unreliable components, and a lack of funding to refine the design. Bricklin's factory in New Brunswick, Canada, was already bleeding money trying to produce the sports car. Diverting resources into a pickup variant only made matters worse. The prototypes never made it to full-scale production, but the engineering, tooling, and promotional expenses drained millions of dollars. Investors, already skeptical of Bricklin's overpromises, saw the pickup project as the final straw. Governments in both the US and Canada, which had provided subsidies to keep the company afloat, began pulling support. By 1976, the Bricklin Motor Company was bankrupt. The sports car had failed spectacularly, but the side projects, including the ill-fated pickup, helped sink the ship faster. From a financial perspective, the Bricklin pickup is a perfect example of how small automakers collapse when they chase too many ideas at once. Instead of perfecting a single product, Bricklin spread resources across multiple untested concepts. The result was not innovation, but implosion. Today, the Bricklin pickup prototypes are almost mythical. Very few exist, and they are considered curiosities rather than serious collector's items. They embody everything that went wrong with Bricklin: ambition outpacing reality, bold ideas undermined by poor execution, and financial mismanagement that doomed the company before it had a chance to succeed. The Bricklin brand never recovered. Malcolm Bricklin would go on to pursue other ventures, including attempts to import the ill-fated Yugo into the U.S. But his dream of building a lasting American automaker ended with the collapse of his namesake company. The pickup project, while small in scale, was symbolic of the waste and overreach that doomed the enterprise. In hindsight, the Bricklin pickup didn't just fail because it was a bad product. It failed because it represented everything wrong with the company's strategy. For Bricklin, it wasn't just a truck. It was the weight that pulled an already sinking ship under. Number 1. The Ford Edsel Ranger pickup, the final nail. Few names in automotive history carry as much infamy as Edsel. Launched by Ford Motor Company in 1957, Edsel was supposed to be the brand that filled the gap between Mercury and Lincoln. Instead, it became one of the most spectacular failures the industry has ever seen. While most people remember the bizarre styling of Edsel sedans, fewer know about Ford's attempt to extend the line into the truck segment with the Edsel Ranger pickup. It was short-lived, poorly timed, and financially devastating. And it stands as the truck that symbolized the collapse of an entire division. The Edsel Ranger pickup was essentially a rebadged Ford F-Series with a new grille and trim. Ford executives thought it would broaden Edsel's appeal by pulling in rural and working-class buyers. But the timing could not have been worse. The late 1950s were marked by a recession, rising unemployment, and shrinking demand for flashy new vehicles. Consumers weren't interested in an unproven truck with controversial styling and a price premium compared to established Ford and Chevy models. Worse still, Ford poured millions into marketing the Edsel brand as a whole, only to find that public reception was lukewarm at best. The truck never achieved meaningful sales. Dealers, already frustrated with slow-moving Edsel cars, had no incentive to push the pickup. Many customers didn't even realize an Edsel truck existed, since advertising focused more heavily on the sedans and wagons. Financially, the Edsel program was catastrophic. Ford reportedly lost over $350 million, equivalent to several billion today, on the brand, and the Ranger pickup was part of that black hole. Even though it was built using existing Ford components, the additional tooling, marketing, and dealer incentives drained precious resources. For every unit sold, Ford lost money. And because the truck offered nothing unique over a standard F-Series, it only cannibalized sales from Ford's own successful lineup. By 1960, the Edsel experiment was dead. Ford pulled the plug after just 3 model years, and the Edsel Ranger pickup disappeared quietly along with the rest of the brand. While Ford as a company was large enough to survive the debacle, the financial hit nearly bankrupted the division and forced massive restructuring inside the company. The Ranger pickup became a symbol of everything wrong with the Edsel project: overhyped, underdelivered, and disastrously timed. Today, surviving Edsel pickups are some of the rarest vehicles from the era, with collectors valuing them for their scarcity rather than their performance or design. They represent a fascinating what-if in automotive history, proof that even giants like Ford can miscalculate and nearly sink themselves in the process. For Ford, the Edsel Ranger pickup was more than just a sales flop. It was a financial anchor, dragging the brand's reputation into the mud and sealing Edsel's fate. It stands as the ultimate reminder that even the strongest automakers can build a truck so misguided it helps bankrupt an entire brand. When we think of trucks, we usually imagine them as the backbone of automakers, dependable workhorses that bring in steady profits year after year. But as we've seen in this countdown, the wrong truck at the wrong time can become a financial disaster. From Studebaker's desperate champ to the infamous Edsel Ranger pickup, these vehicles didn't just fail in the marketplace, they helped drag their companies toward bankruptcy, mergers, or outright extinction. What's most striking is that many of these trucks weren't entirely bad ideas. Some were ahead of their time, others simply mismanaged, and a few were sunk by economic forces beyond their control. Yet they all share one thing in common. They remind us how risky the auto industry can be, and how even giants can fall. So the next time you see a rare oddball pickup, remember, behind that shiny grille may be the story of a company's downfall.